Sure. So I'm just going to give a little presentation and then we'll open it up for some questions from you guys. So really the purpose for the meeting tonight is, I think maybe some of you, I hope all of you are familiar with the project a little bit, but we really want to, now that we're entering into the final permitting stage for this project, we want to give it one last opportunity to kind of present the project and garner some additional public input and comments. So in case you're not familiar with where this particular project is located, it's on Route 28 along the Parkers River. It's right here. You have Higgins Kroll over here. We're not that far from Town Hall, Swan Pond. You have the Stop and Shop here, as well as the BSU Cape Cod, excuse me, University. So the project is, the site's basically a 22-acre parcel. It's been vacant for a really long time. The town purchased it in 1986 for recreational purposes. A lot of you might know about the fact that we had been working very hard for many years for a public-private marina. We did a detailed financial feasibility study, and it was deemed not to be financially feasible in 2014. So the Board of Selectmen formed the Drive-In Site Utilization Committee in 2015 to take a look at different types of uses that might be available for this property. The DISEC was really looking at ways to create a destination location, something that would bring people to Yarmouth and really energize this section of Route 28, as well as provide water access to the beautiful Parkers River. They ended up coming up with an idea for a Riverwalk Park, a boardwalk, and then having an area for periodic special events. And this was all detailed through a multi-year feasibility and concept design study that also included a fairly robust public engagement process with many different public input meetings that actually resulted in some modifications to the project that you'll see in more detail as we go through the slides tonight. But very briefly, for the park, we did some improvements to improve traffic and pedestrian safety and to make sure that we had enough security and crime prevention and also safety for kayak usage. One of the biggest changes was the boardwalk had originally been designed to go all the way across to Seagull Beach. We ended up truncating that to a looped boardwalk that you'll see this evening. And then with regard to the event space, we've moved forward. There's some concerns about sounds with certain performances that were being done there. And we did a sound study that really reoriented the temporary stage towards Route 28 to lessen some of the impacts in abutting neighborhoods. So the town and the DISEC have been working with our consultant Beta for the last year, basically, to finalize the design and permitting for the project. This kind of gives you an overall view of the park as it's being designed at this current moment. As you come in at the entrance, which is the one here, you can see that there is a pump station shown there. That's our municipal pump station. This is a low-lying area that will be collecting municipal wastewater along Route 28. So we had to make sure that we had enough space to incorporate that into our particular project. At the entrance, we also tried to improve that pedestrian safety by working with Mass DOT for a flashing beacon crosswalk there, so it'll be safer for people to cross the road. We also have median island here to separate the traffic coming in and going out, and we have 2 lanes going left and right as we're exiting the park. We also have a shared use pathway or a bike path coming in here that also is going to be looping all the way around the park. So it gets people here, but then they also have a great little route that they can do while they're in the park itself. We also are proposing to have a flexible 3rd lane here for special events, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as we move along with the presentation. We have a lot of walkways and pathways that we're proposing down here along the river, so people have an opportunity to be close to the water and also have some nice views of the water. We have here number 5 is the parking area. We have 88 parking spaces, including handicap parking spaces. We've also created some of these different types of rooms here between the pathways and the parking area. Number 6 here is the artist shanties, which is really what we're showing is kind of like a walking path where we might be able to have different shanties for artists or different types of vendors. We might have some different types of yard games. We might have some public art. So it'd be a nice place for people to walk and look at a lot of different things and maybe shop at these little artist shanties that we have here. We also have different areas that we're going to be having interpretive signage or different types of signage to tell people about some exciting things that are going on in the park and to identify some environmental things that they might be interested in, as well as having some safety rules at the kayak launch. We're also doing a lot of landscape restoration along the river's edge as well. There's a couple larger items that I think we're going to show in a little bit more detail for you. Number 7 here is the restrooms that we're going to have on the site. We also have area 8 down here, which is the natural play area. Number 9 is the kayak launch. And then this here, 10, is where we're going to have periodic periodic special events for the site. So just kind of showing you here, this is the location for the restroom, and we had to take into consideration some building code requirements. So we're elevating this area up, and we're also doing some dry flood proofing, so that we wanted to make sure that we were meeting all the codes, but that we didn't have something that was sticking out inappropriately in the area. We also have many different ways of accessing the site. There's some stairs coming down here to the parking area. There's a handicap accessible route, as well as stairs down to what's over here is the special event space. On the right here, you have a little layout of how it's going to be. There's some offices or some flex space in the front. There's also some mechanical and storage area, as well as ladies and men's restrooms. This is just to give you a little idea what the restrooms are going to look like. We wanted to make sure that we had that Cape Cod style. We ended up using a hipped roof and a cupola on the top, kind of reminiscent of the pavilion at Packett's Landing, if any of you have seen that. What you're seeing here is this is what would be facing Route 28. This is the door to the ladies' restroom, and then we're going to have a water fill and a fountain here. This is the side that would be facing the event space with the room door to the men's restroom. And then this is just the elevation showing you that would be facing the river, and that's the office space there. Looking into the natural play area, we kind of had looked at this in multiple different ways. And we have some changes that have been made after we met with the Recreation Commission, but we're really trying to take into consideration some grade changes here and come up with some different playscape areas and different play areas for the children. Here on the blue is a little tunnel that the kids can go through. We have a little slide over here with handicap accessibility to get to the slide. And then we also have some level like balance beams type activities going on here. This kind of shows you some of the different pictures, and this would be the balance beams or perhaps a little structure that kids could play on. We met with the Recreation Commission, and they happen to be looking at the recent plans for the Sandy Pond Recreation Area that has an accessible playground. And they had a really cool pirate ship, which we thought might be perfect for this particular area, being across from the Witta Pirate Museum and the Pirates Cove. So we're hoping if we can maybe having an alternative where we could put in a pirate ship for the project. I think the kids would like that in particular. This just kind of gives you a little picture of what it would look like. Natural looking, not a lot of bright colors, but something that would blend in a little bit, but also fit with the area. And also maybe having some additional swings and things that kids could play on. The other really big element here is the kayak launch, to allow for people to launch their kayaks and paddle boards. We picked a location. It was a little tricky location because we want to make sure there's a little strip of salt marsh here. We want to make sure that we were minimizing any impacts to that. There's also a bowing out area here in the river itself, because we wanted to give people an opportunity to launch, orientate themselves before they move into the traffic in the river itself. You can see down on this section here that we needed to have a boardwalk because we need to be elevated and go over small area of salt marsh, and then we have gang planks that come down to the floats here where you would be launching your kayak. We're also going to have up here areas for people to store their own kayaks. In many places in town, recreation areas, you can rent a space to store your own kayak. We're also looking at having a little shed for having a vendor to rent kayaks for people to access. And we're also looking into maybe having some cameras somewhere in this area so we can have a look up and downstream to kind of see what the traffic is like on a regular basis. This just kind of gives you an idea of what the zero entry floats would look like. And then the last really big element in the park itself is the event space. And what you're seeing here is an event space that's really set up for, like if we were going to have some type of performance event. This doesn't mean that there's not a lot of other types of events that could be there, like boat and car shows, craft fairs, pirate festivals. We just had this last summer, and carnivals we've had in the past, as well as other recreational activities. Just kind of zooming in a little bit to give you an idea of what's going on here. As I mentioned before, there is this third flexible paved. It will look like grass, but it will allow for vehicles to move over it. So vehicles can come in. If you have an event at a certain time, you can have 2 lanes coming in and 1 lane going out, or when the event's over, you can have 2 lanes going out and 1 lane coming in. You can even have like a little ticket area here where people can stop and go into the event, or if it's full up, they can turn around and leave and go the other way. One of the big things that we've done since the concept and feasibility studies, we did do a detailed sound study with Reuter Associates to see what was the best orientation for a performance stage so that we wouldn't be having a lot of sound going into the adjoining neighborhoods. That sound study basically had determined that the best orientation would be actually be facing Route 28, like 10 degrees north in this particular direction, as we have shown here, and also making sure that we any events would use line array sound systems and a sound engineer to make sure that the sound stays here and it dissipates as it moves further away from the sound, and also limiting the sound to a certain decibel level here. This area, this is a 200 by 200 foot like kind of audience area. This is where the bulk of the audience would be standing with the temporary stage area. So when you take all these things into consideration, it really got the decibels down in the neighborhood to closer to 52 decibels, which is very similar to like an office level of sound. What you're seeing around here is like food trucks or vendors could be surrounding this area, and they would have electric and water as well. There would also be Wi-Fi for the vendors. And again, we're looking at cameras to have cameras that would be facing an event area, and then also cameras that would be facing down over towards the artist shanties area, just to keep an eye on things. And then over on this area here, we have some walking trails that are going to go through the woods to the boardwalk area. Here. I think I'm going to turn it over to Eric Gawley to kind of go over the boardwalk aspects of the project.
Thank you, Kathy, and give your voice a rest. So as Kathy mentioned, the boardwalk's gone through a couple different iterations. So this is directly south of the site that used to be where the drive-in theater was. So there's a short connection through the woods. Let me see if I can do this. There's a short connection through the woods here. And then the idea originally was to develop a boardwalk all the way across to Seagull Beach. And that was a previous alternate that was studied and eventually modified to just be this smaller loop. And so what happens is there's a western branch and an eastern branch. There's a transition area where you come up the walking path and you transition up onto the boardwalk. The boardwalk itself then is elevated over the marsh with a couple of lookout locations here. Take advantage of the views to the south and to the west. And then there's a transition back after a small bridge here crossing this tidal creek, and you transition back down to grade. Here's a couple concepts that we've been working on for the boardwalk itself. So you can see our goal is to make it wider than the Bass Hole boardwalk. So we're looking at a 6-foot width. I think COVID got everyone thinking a little bit differently about how important it is to be outside, but yet also maintain space between you and other folks. So Bass Hole is 4 feet wide. Our proposal is 6 feet. The railing on either side. You can see in the details, one concept is a cable railing, which is more visually open and transparent, and that might be nice in areas where you're sort of looking out to the south and west. And then probably some combination of that with a vertical picket, which is a more conventional type of railing that you see down there on the bottom. The idea then also is to have some overlooks, as I mentioned before, places where people can step outside a little bit and look beyond. There might be some interpretive panels in these areas. And we're also looking at ways to incorporate some seating on the boardwalk loop. It's about 1,300 feet in length. So it'd be nice to be able to have some areas where folks can rest if need be. We spent a lot of time early in the summer and the spring looking at some different options on how best to support the boardwalk. There's lots of different challenges out there, as you can imagine. And the two on the bottom were ones that were evaluated and then discounted. We were working with the Conservation Commission on some ideas related to FRP, which is fiberglass reinforced plastic. And the idea was that maybe a composite pile, an FRP pile, would be very durable and long-lived. And it turned out in that setting, it would, but there were also some challenges with getting that system to work. We went through a couple of different configurations. You can see the single and the dual. What we ended up with is this helical anchor system. So this is like a large screw, if you will, kind of screwed into the mat of the marsh itself, and then elevated above the marsh grasses. You can see this clearance here. This system is a relatively low impact system as far as how it's installed. The equipment's smaller. We would use marsh mats to protect the marsh itself. The work would be conducted most likely off season, so when the grasses are dormant. And all in all, the impacts are less too in terms of the permanent impacts. The size of those helical anchors are a lot smaller than the piles that we show below. So ultimately, working with the DISOC, the Conservation Commission, we arrived at the helical anchors as the preferred alternative for the support system of the boardwalk. And so moving forward, and the boardwalk's a big piece of it, there's layers of permitting that we're going through. This is a fairly comprehensive list. There might be one or two more that we need to go through as well. We're about at the 75% stage right now. So that means we're entering into a more active permitting process. And this meeting tonight is part of that process, as part of the MIPA Act, in terms of just making sure that there's community outreach and opportunities for public engagement. I think we've had 50 meetings in the last 5 years, probably on that order. So there's been
Right.
so there's been a lot of public participation, public input. The design's been modified, as I mentioned, because of the public input. So this is just part of the regulatory process, is making sure that we present the project at the status it's at, and folks have an opportunity to comment. As far as project cost and funding, Kathy may have to help me if I go astray, but the original estimate was just under $8 million. Funding has been secured for the project, and from multiple sources. You can see them there. CPA funding, Land and Water Conservation Grant, Mass Seaport Grant as well. DCR is contributing. And so we're looking at the project costs more closely as we're at this phase of the project. As you know, everything's become a little more expensive. And there's also some challenges with supply chain on some of the items. And so we're working to build a project that's flexible and resilient, and maybe has some options within it, the way the project's structured, so that it's a project that's constructible. The design costs are a little bit behind where the design plans are. So we're about at the 30% level on those, but they'll catch up quickly as the 75% plans get completed. And I think you're in the process of maybe looking for some additional funding for specific elements like the public access to the waterfront. Could it be eligible for CPA funding for the kayak and paddleboard launch? And then our schedule looks like this. We're in the process of the permitting, as I mentioned before. That'll continue through probably into the first of the year, actually probably a little into January. We'll be finalizing the bid documents this winter with the goal of doing the contracting through the summer, and then starting construction in the fall of next year. And in all likelihood, it would be some fall construction and then through the following season. So I think you'd be fine you're still planning events, correct, for this coming summer? Yeah, right. So, and then the next summer would be the summer off from those events. So with that, I believe that's our last slide. I'll go back to one of the plans, and Kathy, I don't know if you want to field questions. I'll put this
Sure.
overall up.
I think if anyone has questions, they need to come
Comments?
to the podium, or they need to talk into a mic so that we can all hear you, and everyone at home as well. Yeah.
Hi, I'm thrilled. It's way over. Oh, Mary Ann Morse. I'm so happy this is finally moving forward. We've been waiting a long time. I think you've done a beautiful job. I'm so impressed. I was hoping that the boardwalk would have gone to Seagull Beach, but this is beautiful. And appreciate it. And Eric, do you work for Beta?
I do. I'm a landscape architect and planner. I'm the project manager. Laura Kraus is here with me tonight. Laura's on the environmental permitting side. Yeah, so she's here to answer if we get into any technical questions about the permitting. That's her corner.
And did you say 75% of the permits are already done?
No, the drawings are at a 70, excuse me, the drawings at our 75% level. So we're entering in earnest into the permitting phase at this point.
Anyone else have questions?
My name is Lisa Rojas, and I live across the street there in my backyard. So if we could go back to the kayak slide,
Sure.
I didn't quite understand where's that road? Across over there. Right next to that area right there.
let's see, this is the kayak launch here.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you want me to go?
To the kayak slide.
I don't know if it shows it. Yeah, we're gonna go back to the kayak launch. We'll do that, sure. Whoops. Correct.
So what is that road there? Just in the upper right? There's some houses there. What's that road?
Oh, right here.
Yes. No.
That's Packanacket Road. The bridge is at the north where the.
Right, it would be up above.
That's the east side of the river.
Can't lose that. It's your life's on there.
My name's Jerry O'Sullivan. I live on Putney Road, or my parents do, I should say. And my biggest thing with this is, my question is the wood line. My house is on the other side of the wood line. And is there any, like this, is there any kind of fence through here? My question is how are you gonna keep the homeless community out of those woods? Basically, yeah. Once in a while, I see a kid walk out of the woods.
Yep.
Once in a while, I see a kid walk out of the woods. I don't live here. I live in Connecticut.
Yep.
My parents live there. So we've owned the house for 50 plus years. So we haven't had a problem until COVID,
Wow.
I guess. So my thing is, you're putting bathrooms in an area that's 200 feet off 28 where there's no eyes. So those woods are going to be full of people.
I think the restrooms are going to have locks on them. They're automatic locks, like all of the different types of recreation facilities where they close at a certain time. I do think that there are some, we did walk through there and we did see some evidence of people living there. We don't understand what you're talking about. I think this would also be bringing a lot more people into an area. So there's a lot of passive surveillance going on. I don't know whether homeless people would feel comfortable being with that many people walking in close proximity to them.
Well, but that's during the day.
Right.
So this is a daytime project.
Yep.
There's nothing at night except for your concert every once
There
in a
may
while.
be some special, you're correct, some
So
special
it's a
events.
daytime thing. So at 5 or 6, 7 o'clock, when everybody leaves, the homeless people come out of the woods. They're going to break into the bathrooms. They're going to have their day with them. I honestly don't, you're hiding a project off of the regular person's eye. It's in the woods. How are you going to keep the homeless community out of there and the trash in the marsh? I live in Milford, Connecticut on the shore. We have these, and these marshes are filthy. I'm not a good public speaker, I'm sorry.
I'm just waiting for you to be, I don't want to interrupt you.
I'm done.
So I'm Jim Saban, I'm the chair. So the path that you see that goes around the outside, that's a drivable path. So one of the things that we did when we designed this is to work with the police department to ensure that they're able to go through the property on a regular basis with adequate lighting. There'll be lighting in different places. I think you'll find that once activity starts to pick up in there, it's less likely that people will live there. But we have arranged with the police department and in our design so that they can literally drive through this whole property without even having to get out of their car for most cases. And as far as littering and that type of thing is, welcome. I mean, we're going to do our best to keep it clean like everybody else does. It's something that I particularly believe is a gem for our community. So I can't imagine us letting it go to something other than being a gem. So I understand your concerns, but I think we're on top of those through our meetings with the police department and through our design process, so that most of those things could be mitigated and should be. We don't have any plans to put any walls or fences up, no.
Okay, no wall, no fence, so people can just walk willy-nilly throughout the woods whenever they choose to. What is the distance on the upper part of that diagram, the distance between the roadway there and that piece of property, which is a person's backyard right there? the top left,
The top left.
top left, yes, that distance there
Distance there.
to there.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure we can get a measurement for you, but maybe,
Is there an
We can look at it
estimate?
by
You guys have been walking this for years.
It's about 100, it's about 100 feet in there, I would say. This is roughly the property line. So, some folks have cleared land beyond, onto town property, but there is openings in the vegetation. But this is roughly where the field is today. It's roughly the same area. So where you see trees there today, we're not pushing into those existing trees. Whoops, I'm sorry. Lost my slide. We're not pushing into those existing trees. We're keeping those, maintaining those existing trees, and then we're actually looking at adding some here to increase the buffering between the field and the neighboring homes.
Again, I'd like to see a fence, a very tall fence, a wall, so that the public cannot be randomly walking around in other person's backyards.
can I ask, are you having issues there now?
I've seen one kid walk out of the woods in my 50 years being at that house.
Okay, so it's not really a major, I mean, we don't have an encampment back there, do we? Because I've never seen anything.
I think this is gonna make it one. I don't think there is not a problem there now because there's enough people that are there. If a kid shows up, enough people say stuff to him, the neighborhood will leave. But I think this is inviting them there because you're giving them an area to use a bathroom during the day, to hang out. No one's gonna see them. There's an acre or two in those woods. Someone could sit in the middle of those woods all day and you'll never see them. And then they're gonna come out at night and then they're gonna get into the neighborhood behind there. And that's an elderly neighborhood. There aren't a lot of like little kids growing. I'm not saying elderly, but they're retired neighborhood. So you don't have people there to, I don't know, watch out for them.
Not as active. Yeah.
No, I think it's gonna become an absolute massive encampment.
And I'll simply leave it with this. We have other parks in this community that are very similar. The parks off of Buck Island Road, we do not have that problem in our community as far as those parks are concerned. Yes, they do. Yep, well,
I mean,
please move to our town. It's a wonderful, safe town. It's not like you think it is.
I lived here 20 years ago and I moved away.
Come on back. It's a wonderful place to live.
I just don't.
I hear your concern, but what I want to say to you is that we look at all those. When we were talking about crime, we actually looked at, other boardwalks to see if there was crime on the boardwalks. And we talked to all the police departments throughout the Cape about their boardwalks. So we've done a lot of that and looked into a lot of that stuff. I think our committee is pretty confident that should an issue of homelessness appear, that the community has the ability to cope with it.
Right, but I still would say, I would agree with Jim that a fence, a wall would preclude people from going into the woods. They would have to actively choose to go into the woods if there were a wall around the perimeter. And you're spending 7 million, you can spend 7,100,000, put a wall there.
Anybody else have any comments? I do see that we have some people who are, have their hands up. Angela Bilski, which I think might be Rich Bilski, who's a member of our committee, if he wants to, hopefully Dave can let him speak.
Actually, this is Stephen Bilski, his son.
Even better.
Sorry, he's in traffic. He won't be able to make it, unfortunately. But I do have one concern with the plan as it stands, and that's I know they took issues on the east side to mitigate site issues with neighboring homes on the east bank by moving it into the trees. But on the west bank, it looks like it curves somewhat more exposed outside the trees and more into the sight lines of the houses on this west bank neighborhood. I was wondering if they could try and mitigate those sight lines somewhat, because there's a cluster of trees on the northwest end. And if they moved it in just a little bit, it would still preserve sight lines for the boardwalkers, but would remove some of the sight lines for the neighboring houses, which abut their backyards right into it.
I think that was thank you, Stephen. I think that was one thing that we did take a look at. in laying this out. You can kind of see it's a little bit of an odd shape. And we're trying to avoid a lot of things, environmental things like the pan, small little marsh areas, but also leaving these taller areas with the trees on them for perching for different type of birds. So what we did originally have planned was having it come more like this, and then through our different discussions, we ended up bringing it down around here closer to the pan behind this little elevated and treed area, and then trying to straighten out this orientation so people would be looking this way or this way to give a little bit more privacy to the people over there. I do think that we're also looking at the possibility of maybe some trees in this particular area, whether we could plant some additional trees to kind of screen that a little bit. We were able to tuck the boardwalk on this side behind this area here for the people on Parker's River to help give them a little bit of an additional hidden area.
You're right about the trees in the area. If you want to point, Kathy, to like 5 and 2, we have some higher, we're sort of in the above the high tide line in there in a couple of locations. So we have some areas where we think we could plant some trees to help visually.
Yeah, that would address the major concern I'm concerned with, is just that it seems on that southwest edge, it's just a bit exposed and coming out into where a number of houses would almost be directly in their view of the marsh. But if there were trees, or it could be moved back behind those trees on the northern end, it would still preserve a lot of the views from the boardwalk along that western edge, but just reduce its impact on the community visibility of the marsh.
This is Jim Saban again. So the points that you make, I want to emphasize that these are the types of things that when we listened to the community, we have made some changes. So the original layout of that boardwalk was further, if I'm looking at this east and west, was further, what's the north side of the picture, was further west, closer to the houses. And there's a little bit of a growth right, I think right about where you're showing that bend. You can see there's a curve in the boardwalk. So we did that to put a distance between the house to the north of that on the picture to try to mitigate any negative impacts. So those are the examples of the things that we've done to try to address concerns from the community in our design and our process. Another example is obviously we eliminated the spur that went out into the marsh, but we've redesigned that to what we believe is the optimal design that gives both privacy to the abutters and an ability to afford the views and the beauty of the marsh for anybody walking the marsh.
I guess my greatest concern is just points 2, 3, and 4. If I'm seeing them right, the image is a little unclear coming through. But just on that southwestern edge, and if there were trees planted along there, it would probably take care of any of the concerns. That's all that I'm just specifically focused on. But other than that, and especially around, I think it's point where that bend is, I definitely do appreciate the bend, which moves it away. So.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part, Steve.
Oh, where that bend is, where it bends away from the western neighborhood, I definitely appreciate that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Laura Krause from Beta Group. I also just wanted to add that the area, I know Kathy spoke about it, but the area of trees, we really wanted to avoid needing to remove trees, and right where you're pointing, remove trees there. When we did our resource area delineation, there were several raptors in that area that were perching, and that's where they were nesting. And we really, in order to go through that area to kind of, or to go on the inside of it would have more hindered the habitat there. And so that's one of the reasons why we came around that.
Would it have been, sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt, but would it have been possible to cut north at all about, it looks like about 50 feet or so? So it'd come well behind the trees without having to clear them, but still coming in.
Wait, you should
Right.
talk into your mic, Jim Saban.
So part of the purpose of this boardwalk is to show off the beauty of the marsh. And if we start putting all the boardwalk behind the trees, then we don't have we've defeated the purpose of building a boardwalk out into the marsh. So that's why, in my opinion, one of the reasons why we've gone to the south of those trees to, again, take advantage of the spectacular views of the marsh. There's some beautiful sunsets there, and there's a osprey nest that's about where that word legend is. So there's some opportunities for us to educate our community, our children, about the marsh through some of the interpretive signage, and it's just going to be a scenic walk as well. So
I
those are the
definitely,
reasons why we went in on that side of the trees.
my only concern would be, I wonder if on that eastern edge between the cluster of trees and the line of trees along Parker's River, if it could continue out into the marsh over there, you would still, I think it's point number 5 or so, you could have it jut out along there a little bit, still get those views, and it would just be a bit less in the face of the houses along the western neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I think it's the end of Niagara.
I mean, yeah, maybe Niagara.
This is the end
One
of
of the
Niagara.
Indian names off of Iroquois and is that Niagara?
Kathy,
Yes?
it's Angela Bilski. It's
Hi,
Pawnee
Pawnee,
Road where we live. It's Pawnee, and it's
so that's the one that sort of runs parallel
And
to
it-
the marsh on
and
the
it
back.
abuts the marsh on the back, and that whole neighborhood abuts the marsh in the back.
Right. Yes, it's Pawnee, Niagara.
So if you went straight
Thank you.
down, if you went straight down Iroquois, would that bring you to Pawnee?
Yes.
Yes.
Those houses that run along the marsh. Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Dave, I believe a Maureen Healy has her hand raised. If you could, oh, perfect.
Yeah, hi, I'm Maureen Healy. I'm on Appleby Road. I think I'm 2 streets or so away from the proposed site. I sometimes have trouble pulling off the street I live on. Are you planning any traffic lights in the area to kind of make it so that people can get around? And my other question is, are you planning on a public landing for any boats that might want to dock up and use the park?
With regard to traffic lights, when the park's in being used in its typical fashion, we just have a typical entrance in and 2 entrances out, one to take a left-hand turn and one to take a right-hand turn. If there's any type of special events that would need to get licensed through the Board of Selectmen, and it goes through a whole staff review, and typically what happens is a police detail will be required to monitor traffic during any larger events. And as of right now, there is no mechanism being shown for public landing for people, other than if you're in a kayak, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Flashing light, crossing walk. A flashing light at the clock for crossing walk.
Oh, yes,
Flashing
yes,
light
yes,
for the-
yeah. We do have a flashing beacon at a crosswalk that we're working with Mass DOT to have installed. Does anyone else have their hand up? Eric, can you see? Okay. Well, oh, Maureen, did you put your hand back up?
Yes, just because there's nobody else asking, I don't want to take up everybody's time. Are you thinking of putting up any stanchions for osprey nests in the area, additional?
It's probably a possibility. That's something that's typically done through the Division of Natural Resources. Yeah, there is one out there now on the marsh, further away, further south than what we're showing here.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think if that's everybody, I just want to thank everybody. Oh, Maureen, anything else or? No. I just want to thank everybody for coming, either online or in person. Certainly is a project that we've all been working on for a long time, and the Board of Selectmen has as one of their goals, and it's something that they are very interested in seeing move forward, and hopefully be this epic, unique recreational facility here in the town of Yarmouth. So thank you so much.